I want you to just picture your kitchen right now. Imagine walking in, opening the refrigerator door, and looking past the milk, past that questionable Tupperware container of leftovers you really should have thrown out like 3 days ago.
Oh, yeah. We all have that container.
Right. But look past it. Peer all the way into the very back of the shelf. Sitting right there, probably half hidden behind a jar of pickles or something, is this humble $1 Warrange cardboard box.
Good old baking soda.
Exactly. Baking soda, you probably bought it 6 months ago. You barely even notice it anymore. And we just kind of vaguely assume its only job in the entire universe is to silently absorb the smell of last night's garlic.
Which it does well, but I mean, that is just the absolute tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, because we have spent the last week pulling together a stack of research that completely shatters that assumption. We are talking about a substance that is currently being used to shave seconds off world-class athletic records, to pull patients back from the brink of death in toxicology wards. And this is the crazy one. Even strip away the defensive fields of solid cancer tumors.
It is genuinely one of the most remarkable compounds we interact with on a daily basis. I mean, the sheer utility of it is staggering, yet its full profile remains almost completely hidden in plain sight.
It really does.
When we look at the scope of its applications, it reads less like a pantry staple and more like a highly engineered, multi-purpose pharmaceutical.
And the sources we pulled for this deep dive really reflect that insane versatility. I mean, we are looking at specialized medical databases like StatPearls and the Mayo Clinic.
The clinical guidelines are just fascinating.
They really are. We're digging into nephrology guidelines from DaVita and the Kidney Disease Outcomes Quality Initiative. We've cross-referenced oncology journals detailing cutting-edge localized treatments and poured over high-performance sports science analyses regarding elite anaerobic thresholds.
And we didn't just stick to the medical stuff either.
No. We even pulled comprehensive homesteading and household chemistry guides just to understand how this powder behaves in the wild, so to speak.
And that eclectic mix of literature, it's a direct reflection of the compound's actual chemical nature, you know?
Yeah.
It isn't that we have discovered 50 different substances that all just happen to look like white powder.
Right, it's all the same stuff.
Exactly. We have discovered one single substance with a chemical mechanism so elegant that it can be applied to 50 completely different fields of human endeavor.
So, our mission today is to uncover the secret life of sodium bicarbonate. We're going to guide you through the exact mechanisms of how this ubiquitous $1 powder acts as the ultimate chemical chameleon.
It really adapts to everything.
It does. We'll explore how it fundamentally alters the physical environment of your kitchen, how it enhances elite physical performance, how it acts as a literal lifesaver in emergency rooms, and, like we mentioned, how researchers are testing it on the absolute frontiers of oncology.
By the time we finish this deep dive, I guarantee you will never look at your pantry staples the same way again.
Definitely not. But to understand how it applies to all these wildly different areas, we have to start at the molecular level, right?
Yeah, we need to define the architecture of the compound because every single medical, athletic, and domestic application we are going to discuss hinges entirely on its specific chemical behavior.
Okay, let's break down the actual chemistry then. When we pour this powder out of that orange box, we are looking at sodium bicarbonate. Chemically, that's NaHCO3.
Right, no HCO3.
And the physical data on this is actually pretty interesting. It has a molecular weight of 84.0007 grams per mole, a density of 2.2 urograms per cubic centimeter, and a solubility of roughly 96 grams per liter in water at standard room temperature.
And those numbers aren't just trivia. They actually dictate its physical behavior in the real world. Like the density of 2.2 urograms per cubic centimeter, for instance, that is what gives it that incredibly specific, mild abrasive quality we rely on for cleaning.
Because of the crystal structure, right?
Exactly. And the solubility of 96 grams per liter. That tells us that it dissolves readily and robustly into water, which, as we'll see later, is absolutely critical for its use in intravenous medical treatments and sports supplementation.
But before it ends up in an IV bag or, a cardboard box, it has to be sourced from somewhere. You don't just harvest baking soda from a field.
No, definitely not.
I was looking into the historical roots of this, and it actually stretches back to ancient civilizations. Like, the Egyptians harvested a naturally occurring mixture called natron.
Right, from evaporated salt lake beds.
Yeah. And they utilized it for a huge variety of tasks. I mean, everything from rudimentary cleaning to literally the desiccation of bodies during the mummification process.
Wow, yeah. Natron was essentially a crude, naturally occurring blend of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate. So they recognized its properties long, long before they actually understood the underlying chemistry.
But today, obviously, the global supply chain looks very different.
Oh, entirely. The vast majority of the world's sodium bicarbonate today is refined industrially from a mineral called trona ore.
Which is mined from massive underground deposits, right?
Yeah.
Stuff laid down millions of years ago by ancient evaporating lakes.
Exactly. The industrial refinement of trona ore really accelerated in the 19th century. That allowed us to transition from scraping dried salt beds in the desert to producing the highly purified industrial-scale sodium bicarbonate that sits in our refrigerators right now.
And that refinement process gives us that pure NaHCO3 molecule.
Yes. And the defining characteristic of this molecule, the absolute core reason it was useful to ancient Egyptians and is useful to modern oncologists, is that it is an amphoteric compound.
Amphoteric. Okay, break that down for us.
It basically means it can act as either an acid or a base. It depends entirely on the chemical environment it finds itself in.
Oh, wow. So it's basically a shapeshifter.
It adapts to its surroundings, yeah. However, if you dissolve it in pure water, it predominantly functions as a weak base, naturally yielding a pH of about 8.3.
Got it. Which brings us to the foundational concept of this entire discussion, something I have a feeling we are going to be referencing heavily over the next hour, the bicarbonate buffer system.
We definitely will be. It's the key to everything.
So the chemical equilibrium equation we found across all the medical literature looks like this. CO2 plus H2O is in equilibrium with H2CO3, which is in equilibrium with a hydrogen ion plus a bicarbonate ion.
Right, and that equation represents a dynamic, reversible process. Carbon dioxide and water combine to form carbonic acid, which then dissociates into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions.
Okay, but in practical biological terms, what does it actually mean for us?
Well, the beauty of this system is its flexibility. In biological terms, you can think of bicarbonate as a molecular sponge for acidity.
A molecular sponge, I like that.
Acidity is fundamentally just a high concentration of free-floating hydrogen ions. So when an environment becomes too acidic, the bicarbonate binds to those excess hydrogen ions.
It just soaks them up.
Exactly. It converts them back into carbonic acid, which is highly unstable. So that carbonic acid rapidly breaks down into harmless water and carbon dioxide gas.
So we can almost think of baking soda as a kind of chemical thermostat.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right, like if you have a thermostat in your house, its sole purpose is to maintain a specific equilibrium, say 72 degrees. If the room gets too hot, the air conditioning kicks on to absorb that excess heat.
Right.
Baking soda basically does this for chemical environments. It absorbs the excess hydrogen ions to stabilize the pH, just neutralizing the acidic extremes.
That analogy holds up perfectly, but, and this is crucial, we have to push it one step further. Imagine a thermostat that is physically consumed by the act of cooling the room.
Wait, what do you mean?
It doesn't just mask the heat. It absorbs the heat and permanently transforms into a completely different material. A really common misconception is that baking soda just covers things up, like masking a foul odor with perfume.
Oh, like an air freshener.
Exactly. But it doesn't do that. It fundamentally alters the physical reality of whatever it touches, transforming acids into neutral salts, water, and gas.
It actually destroys the acid.
Yes. That transformative destructive power is the engine driving every single application we're going to explore.
Okay, well, let's apply that transformative power to its most accessible arena, your home.
Let's do it.
The household guides outline domestic, outdoor, and hygiene hacks that completely rely on this ability to alter pH and transform acids. Let's look at the kitchen first.
The abrasive qualities are fantastic here.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that its density of 2.20 grams per cubic centimeter gives it a crystalline structure.
Right. It hits the absolute perfect sweet spot for domestic cleaning. The crystals are hard enough to physically dislodge complex stain molecules, like, say, the dark tannins left behind by coffee in a ceramic mug. But the Mohs hardness of the crystal is actually lower than the hardness of ceramic or glass.
Oh, so it scrubs away the stain, but it literally can't leave micro scratches on the surface of the mug.
Precisely. It's tough on stains, gentle on surfaces.
But the physical scrubbing is really only half the story, isn't it? The chemistry gets totally wild when we look at how it tackles polymerized, baked-on grease in an oven.
Oh, this is my favorite household application. The household chemistry sources refer to a process called saponification.
Saponification? Which sounds fancy, but what is it doing?
Saponification is the literal chemical process of making soap.
Making soap out of the grease.
Exactly. Polymerized grease is essentially this matrix of stubborn fatty acids bonded really tightly to the surface of your oven.
Yeah.
When you mix baking soda with water to form a thick paste and apply it to that greasy spill, the highly alkaline environment begins attacking those fatty acids.
Okay, so you leave the paste on for what, 15 to 24 hours?
Right, it needs time. And during that time, the alkalinity actually cleaves the ester bonds in the grease.
It breaks the molecular structure apart.
It breaks it entirely apart, converting the grease into glycerol and a crude fatty acid salt. And that fatty acid salt, that is soap.
So you are not scrubbing the grease away. You are chemically forcing the grease to become water-soluble soap.
Yeah, which you can then just effortlessly wipe away with a damp sponge.
You are literally weaponizing the grease against itself. That is incredible. And we see a similar enhancement of cleaning power in the laundry room, too.
We do. Adding half a cup of baking soda to your wash water is heavily recommended.
Because it raises the overall pH, which softens the water.
Right, and that actually allows the surfactants in your commercial laundry detergents to function far more efficiently.
But it's also specifically cited as the ultimate remedy for those brutal, stubborn, yellow underarm stains on white dress shirts. You know the ones.
Oh, yeah. And those stains are fascinating because they aren't just dirt. The yellowing is the result of a very specific chemical reaction.
Between sweat and deodorant. Huh?
Exactly. Human sweat contains proteins and is naturally slightly acidic. When that acidic sweat mixes with the complex aluminum compounds found in commercial antiperspirants, they bond together,
And then they oxidize on the fabric.
creating that hardened yellow residue. But a baking soda paste breaks that down perfectly.
Because the alkalinity neutralizes the acidic component of the sweat.
Yes, and it actively disrupts that complex protein-aluminum bond, physically lifting the stain out of the fabric fibers. It dismantles the chemical structure of the stain.
Which honestly transitions perfectly into how it handles odors.
Let's talk about the classic use case. Placing an open box in the refrigerator or the bottom of a trash can.
Right, the thing everyone uses it for.
Exactly. Because most commercial deodorizers, they just rely on heavy perfumes like artificial pine or overwhelming lavender to just overwhelm your olfactory receptors.
They just blind your nose so you can't smell the decaying organic matter in the garbage.
But baking soda obviously doesn't have a scent. It operates on that same chemical thermostat principle we discussed earlier.
It does. Foul odors are usually highly volatile molecules floating in the air.
And some of them are highly acidic, right? Like the smell of sour, spoiling milk. Yes, and some are highly basic, like the amines released by spoiling fish. Because baking soda is amphoteric.
It reacts with both ends of the spectrum.
Exactly. It intercepts those volatile molecules in the air and reacts with them, neutralizing them into heavy, non-volatile salts.
Ah, so a volatile molecule can float into your nose, but a heavy salt cannot.
Precisely. Studies have shown it can reduce putrid trash can odors by up to 70% simply by pulling the smelly molecules out of the air and dropping them to the bottom of the container as inert dust.
But there is a massive caveat to this. I saw in the sources that they are adamant that you must replace that box every 30 days.
Yes. You can't just leave it in there forever.
Going back to our thermostat analogy, once the baking soda has reacted with those odor molecules, it is chemically spent.
It has permanently transformed into salt. If you leave a box in your fridge for 6 months, you are literally just storing a box of inert salt that is doing absolutely nothing to clean the air.
The buffering capacity drops to zero.
Right. The chemical reaction requires unreacted bicarbonate. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Okay, let's step outside for a moment because the homesteading literature highlights this brilliant horticultural application known as the Cornell formula.
Oh, this is a classic example of using pH manipulation to control biological environments.
So what's it used for?
The Cornell formula is primarily used to combat fungal infections on plants. Things like powdery mildew on squash leaves or black spot on roses.
And the formula itself is remarkably simple, right? It's just 1 tablespoon of baking soda, 1 gallon of water, and a drop of liquid dish soap.
That's it.
Now, I know the soap acts as a surfactant to help the liquid stick to the waxy surface of the leaf, but the baking soda isn't acting as a direct poison, is it? Like, it isn't selectively killing the fungus.
No, not at all. It is altering the environmental conditions.
How so?
Fungal spores require very specific parameters to germinate and thrive, and they typically favor a slightly acidic environment. When you spray this weak alkaline solution onto the plant, you instantly shift the surface pH of the leaf.
Oh, so the leaf becomes too alkaline.
Exactly. The spores might still land on the leaf, but they find themselves in a chemical desert. They cannot initiate their growth cycle in an alkaline environment, so the infection is halted before it can spread.
That is so smart. We also saw it recommended heavily for outdoor safety, specifically for extinguishing grease fires on a barbecue grill.
Which is crucial because water is catastrophic on a grease
Oh
fire.
yeah, if you pour water on a grease fire, it sinks below the burning oil, instantly flashes into steam, and violently ejects the vaporized burning oil in all directions. It's basically a bomb.
But baking soda utilizes something called thermal decomposition. When dumped onto a high heat fire, the sodium bicarbonate rapidly decomposes, releasing a massive, dense cloud of carbon dioxide gas.
And carbon dioxide is heavier than ambient oxygen, so it sinks.
Right. It essentially acts like a heavy chemical blanket, smothering the flame and starving it of the oxygen it needs to sustain combustion. It attacks the chemical triangle of the fire.
Now, we see these incredible neutralizing benefits in the kitchen and the garden, but, and this is a big but, things get significantly more complicated when people start applying this logic to their own bodies.
Yes, they do.
The DIY beauty and personal care space is absolutely flooded with baking soda hacks. It's recommended for soothing eczema, psoriasis, and severe poison ivy reactions.
And to be fair, for those specific acute conditions, it is highly effective. If you have a blistering poison ivy rash, soaking in a warm bath with a quarter cup of baking soda for 10 to 15 minutes provides immense immediate relief.
Because the mild alkalinity of the bathwater neutralizes the acidic irritants deposited by the plant. Yeah.
Exactly, and it actively dampens the localized inflammatory response.
We also see it used for oral hygiene, like as a mouthwash. It targets and neutralizes those volatile sulfur compounds that cause severe halitosis.
And as a toothpaste, it leverages that precise crystalline density we discussed earlier to physically scrub away deep coffee and tea stains without gouging the enamel of the teeth.
It is highly effective when used sparingly and for targeted issues.
Sparingly being the operative word there.
Exactly. Because there is a massive contradiction here in the wellness space. We are currently living through this trend where consumers assume natural automatically equals optimal.
Right.
People are using baking soda as a daily aggressive face wash. They're using it as a clarifying rinse for their hair. It is the primary active ingredient in a huge portion of natural aluminum-free deodorants.
Which is a huge problem.
Yeah, because if you look at the dermatological feedback or even just read consumer reviews, thousands of people are reporting severe contact dermatitis.
Oh, absolutely.
They are getting burning, red rashes in their armpits, and their hair is literally snapping off.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, if this compound is so natural, and if it cures a poison ivy rash so perfectly, why is it violently burning people's skin and destroying their hair?
That contradiction is entirely resolved when you understand biological pH. Just because a substance is naturally occurring does not mean its pH is compatible with human biology.
Right.
Human skin has evolved a highly specific protective layer known as the acid mantle.
And, I mean, as the name implies, it needs to be acidic.
Exactly. The natural pH of healthy skin sits right between 4.5 and 5.5. This slight acidity is non-negotiable. It is required to lock in localized moisture and to create a hostile environment for pathogenic bacteria.
Okay, so our skin is naturally around a 5.0, but what's the pH of baking soda again?
It's 9.00. It is highly alkaline.
Oh, wow. That's a huge difference?
It is. When you take a pH 9.0 substance and rub it aggressively into your underarms every single day, you are actively and violently stripping away the acid mantle. You are destroying your skin's primary defense mechanism.
So the body reacts.
Violently. For a vast portion of the population, repeatedly applying that alkaline paste to a sensitive, high-friction area like the axilla triggers severe contact dermatitis, intense redness, and painful weeping rashes.
Ouch. And it's the exact same problem for the hair clarifying rinses, isn't it?
Yes. Hair shafts thrive at a low acidic pH. When you expose a hair shaft to a highly alkaline baking soda wash, the cuticles, which you can sort of visualize as microscopic shingles overlapping on the outside of the hair, are forced to swell and lift outward.
Ah, so that's why the hair feels squeaky clean to the person.
Right, because all the natural oils have been entirely stripped away. But on a microscopic level, those lifted cuticles are now snagging on one another.
So the friction increases exponentially.
Yes, all the internal moisture evaporates out, and eventually the structural integrity fails and the hair physically snaps. It is an aggressive mismatch of chemistry.
Baking soda is an unparalleled tool for neutralizing harmful extremes, like the acute acid of a poison ivy reaction. But it is highly destructive when used as a daily replacement for your body's carefully calibrated acidic barrier.
Like you said earlier, you do not want to use a chemical thermostat to crank the heat up to maximum when your house is already perfectly comfortable.
That makes so much sense. Well, if baking soda neutralizes acid on the external surfaces of our skin and in the air of our refrigerators, the obvious next question is what happens when we ingest it to manage our internal acid?
This is where things get really medically significant.
Let's move from the external to the internal and look at the physiological buffer, specifically focusing on digestion and kidney health.
This represents a shift from household hacks straight into foundational internal medicine. The most widespread, historically common internal use of sodium bicarbonate is as a cheap, over-the-counter antacid for acute heartburn and indigestion.
Right. People have been dissolving spoonfuls of baking soda into water after heavy meals for over a century.
The mechanism here is a direct, violent, acid-based neutralization inside the human stomach.
Because your stomach secretes hydrochloric acid, or HCl, to break down complex proteins and initiate digestion.
Correct. And in cases of acid reflux, that highly caustic HCl splashes upward and irritates the sensitive mucosal lining of the esophagus. That's the burning you feel.
So when you swallow a solution of sodium bicarbonate, the chemical equation plays out instantly. HCl plus NaHCO3 becomes NaCl plus H2O plus CO2.
Yes, the baking soda physically intercepts the hydrochloric acid and neutralizes it into standard salt, water, and carbon dioxide gas.
And that massive immediate burp that follows drinking baking soda water, that isn't just indigestion shifting around, is it?
No, not at all. That burp is the physical exhaust of that chemical reaction escaping your stomach.
It's literally the CO2 gas venting out.
Exactly. It is rapid and effective, but the medical literature, particularly the Mayo Clinic guidelines, lays out very strict dosing parameters.
Yeah, I saw those. For acute indigestion, they recommend exactly 1/2 teaspoon dissolved in 4 ounces of water.
Right.
And for a healthy adult under the age of 60, the absolute maximum is 7 doses within a 24-hour period. But critically, for adults over 60, the maximum allowable limit drops sharply to only 3 doses.
Which is a very important distinction.
I was reading through the cardiovascular warnings, and that sharp drop for older adults is entirely tied to the sheer volume of sodium involved, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Older kidneys and aging cardiovascular systems are significantly less efficient at regulating massive influxes of systemic sodium.
So pushing past 3 doses introduces a sodium load that can, trigger severe blood pressure spikes?
Blood pressure spikes and severe volume overload. It's a huge strain on the heart.
There is also a highly specific, kind of fascinating warning in the literature regarding diet. You are heavily cautioned never to take large doses of baking soda alongside large amounts of dairy products.
Oh, yes. That combination triggers a dangerous physiological cascade known as milk alkali syndrome.
Milk alkali syndrome.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you are drinking heavy amounts of milk or eating large amounts of cheese, you have a very high concentration of circulating calcium in your blood.
Right. And when you introduce the massive alkaline load of the baking soda on top of that, it fundamentally alters how the kidneys process that calcium.
Instead of excreting it, the body retains it.
Exactly. Blood calcium levels spike to dangerously toxic levels, hypercalcemia. This can lead to the permanent calcification of soft tissues throughout the body.
Like forming severe kidney stones.
Yes, and it can ultimately result in irreversible kidney damage.
Wow. Which actually brings us directly to the role of the kidneys in general. The nephrology reports, specifically those from DaVita and the Kidney Disease Outcomes Quality Initiative, dive incredibly deeply into how sodium bicarbonate is utilized as a frontline treatment for chronic kidney disease, or CKD.
This is a profound medical application. To fully grasp it, we have to understand the baseline function of healthy kidneys. Every single day, your body metabolizes dietary protein.
Right.
And a natural, unavoidable byproduct of breaking down those proteins is the generation of a significant metabolic acid load.
So in a healthy individual, the kidneys act as the ultimate filtration system. They constantly filter this acid load out of the bloodstream, excrete the excess hydrogen ions into the urine, and simultaneously generate new, fresh bicarbonate to return to the blood.
Keeping the systemic pH locked in perfect balance.
But in chronic kidney disease, that intricate filtration and generation mechanism fails.
It does. The failing kidneys can no longer clear the daily acid load, and they stop producing sufficient replacement bicarbonate.
And the inevitable result of that is a condition called metabolic acidosis.
Yes.
The clinical definition is stark. It is diagnosed when the serum carbon dioxide, or bicarbonate levels in the blood drop below 22 millimoles per liter. Essentially, your blood is physically becoming too acidic.
And the human body simply cannot tolerate an acidic bloodstream. It triggers a state of physiological panic. To survive, the body begins looking for any available alkaline buffers to neutralize the blood.
And it finds those buffers in your own tissues, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, yes. The literature details how the body will literally begin catabolizing, breaking down its own muscle tissue to release amino acids like glutamine.
Which the kidneys then use to try and excrete more acid.
Right, and this leads to profound rapid muscle wasting in CKD patients. But it actually gets worse.
How does it get worse than eating your own muscles?
Well, when the muscle buffers aren't enough, the body turns to its largest reserve of alkaline minerals, the skeleton.
Oh, God.
It activates osteoclasts, which are cells that break down bone tissue. It literally strips calcium and carbonate directly out of your bones and dumps them into the bloodstream to neutralize the acid.
So your body is actively dissolving your skeleton and eating your muscles just to keep your blood pH stable enough to keep your heart beating.
Exactly. The resulting bone resorption causes profound structural weakening and severe bone disease.
This is where clinical intervention with sodium bicarbonate becomes entirely life-altering. The KDOQI and KDIGO nephrology guidelines establish strict targets. Physicians aim to maintain serum bicarbonate levels between 24 and 26 millimoles per liter in CKD patients.
Yes, and they achieve this by prescribing specialized daily oral sodium bicarbonate tablets.
So they just give them the buffer in a pill.
Right. By artificially providing the alkaline buffer that the failing kidneys can no longer produce, the tablets neutralize the daily dietary acid load. The body no longer has to dissolve its own bones or muscles.
That's incredible. And extensive clinical trials have demonstrated that this consistent daily neutralization actually slows the decline of the glomerular filtration rate.
It doesn't just manage the symptoms, it physically slows down the progression of the kidney failure itself.
Now, this sounds incredibly accessible. I mean, if someone listening has early-stage kidney disease, the temptation is massive to just walk into the kitchen, grab the dollar box of baking soda from the pantry, and start eating a spoonful every morning to protect their kidneys.
I cannot emphasize enough how catastrophic that would be. Self-medicating with unmeasured baking soda powder for a chronic kidney condition is incredibly dangerous and highly ill-advised.
Right.
It must be strictly prescribed, formulated, and continuously monitored by a nephrologist.
And that's because of the sodium, right? We keep coming back to the sheer density of the compound.
Exactly. 1 single gram of raw baking soda powder contains a staggering 276 milligrams of sodium.
Wow.
If a patient with compromised kidney function starts scooping raw powder into a glass of water, they are blindly ingesting massive, unpredictable sodium loads.
And failing kidneys cannot process excess sodium. The sodium forces the body to retain massive amounts of fluid. The patient goes into severe volume overload.
Their blood pressure spikes uncontrollably. Fluid builds up in their extremities and their lungs, and this immense cardiovascular strain can rapidly exacerbate or directly trigger congestive heart failure.
So the clinical balance is razor thin. The systemic alkalizing benefit for the bones and the kidneys must be meticulously weighed against the cardiovascular risk of the sodium load.
Yes, it requires precise, continuous blood monitoring that you simply cannot replicate with a kitchen spoon.
We've seen how sodium bicarbonate meticulously manages chronic, slow-moving diseases like CKD over years and decades.
Yeah.
But if we move into the emergency room, the timeline compresses from decades down to minutes.
It really does.
In toxicology and critical care, this everyday powder becomes an acute, high-velocity lifesaver.
In emergency medicine, it is almost exclusively administered intravenously, and it operates as a frontline, highly specific antidote for a terrifying array of lethal poisonings.
What's the main one they use it for?
The textbook example taught in every single medical school is its use in tricyclic antidepressant, or TCA, overdoses.
Okay, TCAs. They're an older class of psychiatric medications, but they are still prescribed, and overdoses are incredibly lethal. When someone overdoses on a TCA, the drug directly attacks the heart, right?
Yes. Specifically, it blocks the fast sodium channels in the myocardial tissue. The human heart relies on those specific sodium channels to conduct the electrical impulses that trigger a coordinated heartbeat.
So when the toxic TCA molecules bind to those channels and block them, The electrical signal stutters and delays.
Exactly. If you look at an EKG monitor, you physically see this delay as a widening of the QRS complex. The heart loses its rhythm, rapidly degrading into fatal arrhythmias and ultimately full cardiac arrest.
And the intervention is fascinating because doctors do not use a complex, highly engineered antagonist drug to fix this. They push massive, rapid doses of IV sodium bicarbonate.
It acts as a dual-action battering ram.
A battering ram. How?
First, the sheer volume of sodium in the IV push floods the extracellular space surrounding the heart tissue. Through sheer physical force of concentration, the massive sodium gradient actively bullies the toxic TCA molecules off the receptors, unblocking the channels.
So the sodium literally shoves the drug out of the way.
Yeah.
But the second action is where the buffering comes in, right?
Yes. The bicarbonate radically and instantly raises the blood pH, pushing it into an alkaline state. TCAs are highly sensitive to pH. In an alkaline environment, the chemical structure of the TCA molecule actually shifts.
Which causes it to bind tightly to plasma proteins floating in the blood rather than binding to the heart tissue.
Exactly. Between the tidal wave of sodium pushing the drug off the heart and the alkaline shift locking the drug onto blood proteins, the toxin is completely neutralized without ever actually leaving the body. The heart rhythm stabilizes.
That is just brilliant, and we see a similar, deeply elegant reliance on pH manipulation when ER doctors treat massive overdoses of aspirin or barbiturates. The mechanism here is called ion trapping.
Ion trapping is a total masterclass in utilizing renal physiology to force the body to clear a poison it otherwise couldn't.
Okay, let's visualize how this works.
Yeah.
Aspirin, which is salicylic acid, is a highly acidic drug.
All right.
When someone takes a massive toxic overdose, the drug circulates in the blood.
Right.
As the blood passes through the kidneys filter the aspirin out into the microscopic tubules that will eventually form urine.
But here's the problem. Because the aspirin molecule is small and uncharged in its natural state, it doesn't stay in the urine.
It slips back out.
Yes, it easily slips right back through the lipid bilayers of the kidney walls and reabsorbs directly into the bloodstream. The kidneys are frantically trying to filter it, but the drug is simply looping right back into systemic circulation.
So the body cannot excrete it fast enough to prevent toxicity.
Exactly. So the ER doctors intervene with IV sodium bicarbonate, but the goal here isn't to change the blood pH, it's to drastically alkalize the urine.
So as the acidic aspirin molecules are filtered into the newly alkaline urine, a violent chemical reaction occurs.
Right. The pH mismatch forces the aspirin molecule to lose a hydrogen ion, and that gives the molecule a strong electrical charge. It becomes ionized.
And that electrical charge changes everything. A heavily ionized molecule is fundamentally incapable of passing back through the highly restrictive, non-polar lipid membranes of the kidney walls.
It's like putting a magnetic lock on the poison.
Yes. The aspirin molecule flows down the river of your urinary tract. It tries to climb back onto the banks to re-enter your bloodstream, but the electrical charge traps it in the fluid.
It is locked in the urine and aggressively flushed out of the body. You are manipulating the pH to turn the patient's own urine into a one-way chemical trap.
It accelerates the excretion rate exponentially, saving the patient from fatal systemic toxicity. And, we don't just see this in IV forms either. The literature covers inhalation injuries, specifically exposure to chlorine gas.
Oh, this is a really important one. Chlorine gas exposure happens in industrial accidents or even when people accidentally mix bleach and ammonia while cleaning at home.
Which people do all the time.
When that gas is inhaled, it reacts immediately with the natural moisture lining the lungs to form hypochlorous and hydrochloric acid.
So the patient is literally experiencing a severe, rapidly progressing chemical acid burn across the delicate pulmonary mucosa of their lungs.
It's excruciating. But paramedics and respiratory therapists utilize sodium bicarbonate to treat it. They don't inject it, though.
Right, they run it through a nebulizer, turning the liquid into a fine, breathable mist.
As the patient inhales the nebulized bicarbonate, the alkaline mist coats the entire interior surface of the lungs. It physically intercepts the newly formed acids, instantly neutralizing them into salt and water.
Immediately halting the chemical burn and preserving the lung tissue. That is localized pH manipulation at its finest.
It really is. The final ER application we must touch on is its role in cardiac arrest.
Right, and this is an area where the medical consensus has shifted dramatically over the decades, hasn't it?
Oh, completely. Historically, standard ACLS protocols recommended pushing IV sodium bicarbonate in almost every single cardiac arrest scenario. The logic was that a stopped heart rapidly accumulates lactic acid, dropping the blood pH precipitously, and that buffering that acid would make the heart more receptive to epinephrine and defibrillation.
But the data didn't support it.
No. Modern guidelines have completely dialed that back. Routine use is no longer recommended because the massive generation of CO2 gas from the buffering process can actually worsen intracellular acidosis if the patient isn't adequately ventilated.
So when do they use it now?
Today, it is reserved for highly specific scenarios. Doctors will push it during a code if the cardiac arrest is known to be driven by severe hyperkalemia, which is a lethally high concentration of potassium in the blood.
Or if the patient had a severe pre-existing metabolic acidosis before the arrest.
Exactly. In the case of hyperkalemia, the rapid alkaline shift forces the excess potassium out of the blood and back inside the cells, electrically stabilizing the dying heart muscle.
The recurring theme in the ER is manipulating the body's internal thermostat to drag a patient back from the edge of death.
That's exactly what it is.
But that leads to a fascinating transition. If altering the body's pH can stabilize a failing heart or trap a lethal poison, what happens if we apply that exact same acid-clearing mechanism to a perfectly healthy human body that is just being pushed to its absolute physical limit?
Now we're talking about the ergogenic edge, athletics and high-intensity performance.
The application of sodium bicarbonate in elite sports science is entirely focused on delaying the biological onset of fatigue. But to understand how the buffering works, we have to precisely define what fatigue actually is at a cellular level.
Right, and we are looking at a very specific window of exertion here. The sports science analyses focus heavily on intense anaerobic exercise activities that last anywhere from 1 to 7 minutes.
We are talking about a 2,000-meter competitive rowing race, a 400-meter or 800-meter track sprint, or, a brutal high-output CrossFit workout.
In those highly intense compressed windows, your cardiovascular system simply cannot deliver oxygen to the working muscles fast enough to meet the massive energy demand. The muscles are first to adapt.
They begin producing ATP cellular energy through anaerobic glycolysis, a process that does not require oxygen.
But that emergency power system comes with a massive penalty, and everyone assumes the penalty is lactic acid.
Oh, absolutely. Ask anyone at a gym why their muscles burn, and they will blame lactic acid.
Which is one of the most pervasive myths in exercise physiology. Lactate is not the enemy. It is actually a highly efficient secondary fuel source that the body shuttles to the brain and the heart during intense exercise.
So what's the real enemy?
The true culprit of the burn, the chemical causing the fatigue, is the massive rapid accumulation of free hydrogen ions.
The anaerobic process splits molecules apart, dumping vast quantities of hydrogen ions directly into the intracellular fluid of the muscle.
Yes. This drives the pH of the muscle plummeting downward. The muscle becomes highly acidic.
And human muscle tissue cannot function in a highly acidic environment.
No, the acidity physically interferes with the cross-bridge cycling of the muscle fibers, the actual mechanical process of contraction.
And even more critically, the low pH violently inhibits the specific enzymes required to run glycolysis in the first place.
The muscle is literally suffocating in its own acidic exhaust. It shuts itself down to prevent permanent, catastrophic cellular damage. That is the true point of failure.
Enter the bicarbonate boost.
The strategy is brilliantly simple in theory. If an athlete ingests a massive dose of sodium bicarbonate before the event, they artificially superalkalize their entire bloodstream. They radically expand their extracellular buffering capacity.
So picture this scenario. The athlete is sprinting. Inside the muscle cell, the environment is becoming violently acidic from the hydrogen ions. But just outside the cell, circulating in the blood, the environment is highly alkaline from the baking soda.
This creates a massive, powerful chemical gradient. The high concentration of bicarbonate in the blood acts like an industrial vacuum.
It sucks it out.
Rapidly and aggressively, it pulls the hydrogen ions out of the working muscle tissue, pulling them across the cell membrane into the blood, where they are instantly neutralized into water and CO2.
Because the acid is constantly being vacuumed out, the intracellular pH of the muscle remains stable for much longer.
Exactly. The enzymes keep firing. The muscle can contract harder, faster, and longer before hitting the point of catastrophic failure. The performance data on this is staggering.
I saw that meta-analyses of elite, highly trained athletes show an average 27% improvement in time to exhaustion within that specific anaerobic window.
Let's contextualize that with the 2,000-meter rowing example. Rowing relies heavily on anaerobic capacity in the final stretch. Supplementing with baking soda translates to roughly a 1.5-second improvement, specifically in the final 1,000 meters of the race.
Now, to a casual observer, 1.5 seconds might sound statistically insignificant.
But in elite world-class competition, 1.5 seconds is an eternity. It is the literal difference between setting a world record and not even making the Olympic podium.
It is a massive, undisputed ergogenic advantage. But, and this is a huge but, there is a very dark, very messy reality to this practice. The dosing required to achieve this vacuum effect is extreme, and it comes with brutal physical consequences.
The scientifically optimized dose, the threshold required to achieve the pH shift, is 0.3 grams of sodium bicarbonate per kilogram of body weight, ingested roughly 60 to 180 minutes prior to the event.
Let's do the math on that.
Yeah.
For a standard 70-kilogram athlete, someone weighing about 154 pounds, that equates to 21 grams of straight baking soda.
Which is a lot.
That is the equivalent of swallowing 3 to 4 heaping tablespoons of pure powder right before you run the most intense race of your life.
And we must recall the chemistry of the stomach. We know exactly what happens when large volumes of sodium bicarbonate hit stomach acid.
It violently generates massive volumes of carbon dioxide gas.
Yes. Swallowing 21 grams of baking soda before a sprint is an absolute recipe for a catastrophic, explosive bathroom emergency.
Oh man, the gastrointestinal distress is legendary in sports science circles. Athletes experience intense, painful bloating, severe stomach cramping, and violent osmotic diarrhea.
The massive sodium load draws water rapidly into the intestines, causing complete digestive chaos. Many elite athletes have attempted this protocol only to find themselves utterly incapacitated in a bathroom stall while the starting gun fires.
The irony is incredible. You are hacking your blood chemistry to push your muscles past their limits, but you completely destroy your digestive system in the process. How are they bypassing this? Because the advantage is too big to ignore, athletes are definitely still using it.
They are. Sports physiologists have spent decades engineering mitigation strategies. One common approach is split dosing, breaking that 21 grams into dozens of tiny doses taken over 3 or 4 hours to prevent a single massive gas explosion in the stomach.
The literature also details co-ingestion strategies, where the athlete consumes the dose alongside a massive carbohydrate-rich meal, roughly 1.5 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight. The sheer physical mass of the food helps buffer the stomach and slows the gastric emptying, dampening the reaction.
There is also chronic loading, which involves taking smaller subclinical doses every day for a week leading up to the competition. This slowly builds the baseline blood alkalinity over days, avoiding the need for an acute massive dose on race day.
But the most advanced high-tech approach mentioned in the journals involves specialized enteric-coated capsules.
This completely bypasses the stomach acid problem. The enteric coating on the pill is designed to survive highly acidic environments without dissolving.
The athlete swallows the pills, they pass completely intact through the hydrochloric acid of the stomach.
And they only dissolve when they reach the neutral, slightly alkaline environment of the small intestine. The bicarbonate is absorbed directly into the bloodstream without ever reacting with the stomach acid, eliminating the gas production entirely.
It's an incredible length to go to. But for an Olympic medal, athletes will do whatever it takes. This perfectly sets up our next transition, which is arguably the most mind-blowing segment of this entire deep dive.
I agree.
We have explored hacking a healthy cell to push it to its athletic peak by neutralizing its acidic exhaust. Now, researchers are applying that exact same neutralizing principle to outsmart our deadliest cellular enemy. We are moving to the frontier, altering the tumor microenvironment in cancer.
This represents one of the most deeply fascinating, albeit heavily nuanced, areas of modern oncological research. To grasp why sodium bicarbonate is even being considered in cancer treatment, we have to fundamentally understand how a solid tumor constructs its immediate environment.
A cancer cell doesn't behave like a normal cell. The oncology journals detail the metabolic anomaly known as the Warburg effect.
Yes. Normal, healthy cells rely on oxygen to efficiently produce energy. But cancer cells, particularly those in rapidly expanding solid tumors, dramatically alter their metabolism.
Even when there is plenty of oxygen readily available in the blood, the cancer cells stubbornly prefer to generate energy through rapid, inefficient glycolysis.
And as we just learned from our athletes, rapid glycolysis produces massive amounts of lactic acid and free hydrogen ions.
Right. The tumor is constantly pumping this acidic exhaust out of its cells and into the surrounding tissue. As a result, the extracellular environment immediately surrounding the tumor, the microenvironment, becomes highly acidic.
The pH regularly hovers around 6.5, which is far lower than the healthy 7.4 of normal tissue.
We can visualize this as an acidic moat physically surrounding the tumor. And this moat isn't just an accident of metabolism. It is a highly evolved defensive and offensive weapon for the cancer.
It is. First, the sheer acidity of the moat acts as a corrosive agent. It physically degrades and destroys the surrounding healthy tissue, effectively carving out physical space for the tumor to invade and expand into.
And second, the acidic environment actively stimulates angiogenesis. It sends chemical signals that force the body to build brand new blood vessels directly into the tumor, ensuring a constant supply of nutrients to fuel its runaway growth.
But the most insidious function of the acidic moat is how it interacts with the immune system and our medical interventions.
It is a literal shield. When the body's immune cells, specifically T cells and natural killer cells, attempt to cross that acidic moat to attack the tumor, the low pH paralyzes them. They become entirely dormant and ineffective.
The acid physically suppresses the localized immune response.
Furthermore, it acts as a chemical shield against traditional chemotherapy. Many frontline cytotoxic chemotherapy drugs are weak bases.
When these basic drugs hit the highly acidic moat surrounding the tumor, a chemical reaction occurs. They become ionized.
And exactly like the aspirin in the kidneys we talked about, an ionized chemotherapy molecule cannot pass through the lipid membrane of the cancer cell. The acid literally blocks the medicine from getting inside the tumor.
The drugs just bounce off.
So researchers looked at this heavily fortified acidic moat and proposed a radically simple idea. What if we just neutralize the moat with baking soda? Which brings us to the landmark clinical trial highlighted in the literature, the TILA-TASTE study.
TILA stands for Targeting Intratumor Lactic Acidosis. This was a highly specific, localized trial focused on patients suffering from hepatocellular carcinoma-aggressive large liver cancer tumors.
For large liver tumors that cannot be surgically removed, the standard line of attack is a brutal procedure called TACE, or transarterial chemoembolization.
In a traditional TACE procedure, a surgeon threads a long catheter up through the arterial system until it is positioned directly inside the specific hepatic artery that is feeding blood to the liver tumor.
They inject massive doses of highly toxic chemotherapy drugs like doxorubicin or oxaliplatin directly into the tumor's blood supply. Then, they inject embolic agents to physically block the artery, trapping the chemo inside the tumor and starving it of oxygen simultaneously.
It is an aggressive, localized strike. But historically, because of that acidic moat, the chemo couldn't penetrate deeply into all the cancer cells, leading to varying, often incomplete rates of success.
In the TILA-TASTE trial, the researchers made one brilliant, profound modification to the protocol. They mixed a 5% sodium bicarbonate solution directly into the chemotherapy injection.
They delivered the chemical thermostat directly into the heart of the tumor. The alkaline bicarbonate instantly neutralized the lactic acidosis. It physically destroyed the acidic moat.
Without the acidic shield ionizing the drugs, the doxorubicin was able to fully and deeply penetrate the cancer cells.
The results documented in the trial were absolutely staggering. The study reported that 100% of the patients who received the bicarbonate mixture achieved complete or partial remission of the visible tumor residues.
100%. The local control rate of the tumors skyrocketed compared to the traditional TASTE procedure. By simply manipulating the pH, they unlocked the full lethal potential of the chemotherapy.
That is profound clinical success. And the journals don't just stop at localized liver injections. They also detail systemic buffering experiments in preclinical animal models.
Yes, researchers have extensively studied mice implanted with highly aggressive metastasizing breast and prostate cancers. In these models, instead of injecting the tumor, they simply replaced the mice's drinking water with a heavily spiked 200 millimolar solution of sodium bicarbonate.
The mice were chronically ingesting massive doses of alkalinity.
Now, to be clear, drinking the baking soda water did not shrink the primary breast or prostate tumors.
No, it didn't.
But it did something arguably much more critical for long-term survival. It dramatically reduced the rate of spontaneous metastases. It stopped the cancer from spreading to the lymph nodes and other organs.
The mechanism behind this is entirely reliant on pH. The process of metastasis, a cancer cell breaking away from the main tumor, chewing its way through the extracellular matrix and entering the bloodstream, requires the use of specialized enzymes called acid-activated proteases, primarily a family of enzymes known as cathepsins.
As the name implies, acid-activated means these cellular scissors only work when the surrounding pH is highly acidic. By systemically elevating the overall pH of the mouse's body with the baking soda water, the environment became too alkaline for the cathepsins to function.
The chemical scissors were inhibited, the cancer cells were physically locked in place, unable to cut their way out of the primary site.
Okay, I'm going to pause us right here. Because as a listener, hearing about a 100% remission rate in a liver trial and stopped metastasis in animal models, the immediate overwhelming instinct is to view this as a suppressed miracle cure. Does this data mean that a cancer patient should abandon their oncologist, walk into the kitchen, and start drinking a massive glass of baking soda water every single morning to cure their cancer?
I am going to deliver the firmest, most nuanced warning of this entire deep dive. No, absolutely unequivocally not.
We need to unpack exactly why, because the data sounds so overwhelmingly positive. Why is self-medicating with baking soda for cancer a terrible idea?
First, we must aggressively separate preclinical animal models from human clinical reality. The systemic drinking water models showing inhibited metastasis were conducted on highly specific, less aggressive cell lines in mice.
Right.
When researchers applied that exact same oral baking soda protocol to mice with highly aggressive cancers like specific pancreatic lines or melanoma, it did absolutely nothing. The tumor spread anyway, and the mice died rapidly.
What about the human liver trial? That was real patients.
Yes, the telomerase study was incredibly successful, but it was successful because it was a highly targeted, localized surgical application. A trained specialist snaked a catheter directly into the tumor's arterial feed and delivered the bicarbonate precisely where it was needed, alongside highly lethal, cytotoxic chemotherapy.
Baking soda is not a standalone magic bullet. It does not possess the chemical ability to kill a cancer cell on its own.
No, it is an adjuvant therapy. Its only role is to remove the tumor's defensive acid shield so that the real, deeply toxic chemotherapy can actually do its job.
If you attempt to self-medicate by drinking massive oral doses of baking soda, you will never achieve the localized concentration required to neutralize a tumor's moat. Instead, you will systemically alter your entire body's blood pH.
Which, as we are about to discuss, will trigger catastrophic, potentially lethal consequences for your kidneys, your heart, and your neurological system long before it ever bothers the cancer.
That transitions us perfectly into our final sobering section. We must confront the dark side. Toxicity, dangers, and warnings. We have spent the last 50 minutes marveling at how massive doses can supercharge athletes and theoretically unlock chemotherapy, but we must urgently address the very real, very lethal dark side of misusing this everyday chemical.
The sheer accessibility of the orange box breeds a dangerous complacency. Sodium bicarbonate is a highly potent reactive chemical, and its misuse has a well-documented history of lethal outcomes.
We have to start with the most mechanically violent complication: gastric rupture. We mentioned earlier that when baking soda hits the hydrochloric acid in your stomach, it rapidly generates carbon dioxide gas. A small dose gives you a burp. But how does this scale up to literally tearing your stomach open?
It requires a specific, disastrous sequence of events. Imagine an individual who has just consumed a massive, incredibly heavy meal. Perhaps they have also consumed several alcoholic beverages, which slows gastric emptying.
Their stomach is physically distended, stretched to its absolute anatomical maximum limit, filled with food, liquid, and acid.
They are experiencing severe, painful indigestion. So, desperately seeking relief, they walk to the pantry, pour a massive, unmeasured tablespoon of baking soda into a glass of water, and swallow it quickly.
That massive payload of bicarbonate plunges into the highly acidic environment of the overstuffed stomach. The chemical reaction is instantaneous and violent.
It rapidly generates a massive, expanding volume of CO2 gas in a matter of seconds. Under normal circumstances, that gas travels up the esophagus and escapes as a belch.
But the stomach is completely blocked by the heavy meal and the fluid. The gas is trapped.
The pressure inside the stomach spikes exponentially. The stomach wall can stretch, but it cannot withstand rapid, extreme pneumatic pressure. The gas violently rips a tear straight through the muscular wall of the stomach.
The contents of the stomach, the acid, the food, the bacteria, spill directly into the sterile abdominal cavity. This is a catastrophic, acute surgical emergency. It triggers massive peritonitis, rapid sepsis, and carries a terrifyingly high mortality rate, even with immediate surgical intervention.
It is a violent physical reaction.
But beyond the physical tearing, what happens to the internal chemistry of the body if you simply overdose over a long period?
You trigger profound metabolic alkalosis. By constantly overwhelming your system with bicarbonate, you shift your blood pH dangerously high, far past the 7.4 equilibrium.
The body demands equilibrium to survive. If the blood is too alkaline, it panics and tries to claw its way back to acidity. How does it manage that?
It alters your respiration. Carbon dioxide dissolved in the blood acts as an acid. Because the blood is too alkaline, the brainstem deliberately depresses your respiratory drive to try and trap CO2 inside your body. You begin breathing very slowly and very shallowly.
You are literally suffocating yourself to try and lower your blood pH. This lack of oxygen, combined with the profound alkaline shift penetrating the blood-brain barrier, leads to devastating neurological symptoms. The patient experiences severe confusion, uncontrollable muscle twitching, tetany, and eventually degrades into full-blown intractable seizures.
Alkalosis is just as destructive as acidosis, and the devastation extends deeply into the body's electrolyte balance.
The toxicology reports heavily emphasize the risk of hypokalemia, a massive crash in blood potassium levels.
This is a direct consequence of the body desperately trying to fix the high pH. As the blood becomes increasingly alkaline, the cells attempt to help by pushing their internal hydrogen ions out into the bloodstream to neutralize the base. However, to maintain electrical neutrality across the cell membrane, for every positive hydrogen ion the cell pushes out, it must pull a positive potassium ion from the blood into the cell.
So the potassium is rapidly drained out of the bloodstream and hidden inside the cells. Your serum potassium levels plummet. And potassium is the core electrolyte that governs the electrical firing of your heart. Severe hypokalemia instantly triggers fatal heart arrhythmias and can drop you into sudden cardiac arrest.
You can literally induce a fatal heart attack simply by overdosing on baking soda.
Who is the most medically vulnerable to this kind of toxicity?
Pregnant women are at a distinct risk. Pregnancy naturally induces fluid retention and alters kidney function. Introducing the massive sodium load of a baking soda remedy can trigger severe, uncontrolled edema, extreme blood pressure spikes, and complicate conditions like preeclampsia.
The literature also flags infants and young children under the age of 6 as highly vulnerable.
A child's renal system and total blood volume are incredibly small. A dose of baking soda that might just cause a stomach ache in an adult can instantly throw a toddler into rapid, lethal metabolic alkalosis. Furthermore, in neonatal intensive care units, if medical professionals push IV sodium bicarbonate too rapidly into a newborn, the sudden extreme shift in blood osmolarity can physically rupture the fragile blood vessels in the brain, causing massive intracranial hemorrhage.
The dosage parameters are terrifyingly precise. And finally, we have to consider the cascade effect of drug interactions, because altering the pH of your stomach or your urine fundamentally changes how every other medication in your body functions.
Chemistry is entirely interconnected. Nothing happens in a vacuum. If you drink baking soda to treat daily heartburn, you make your stomach highly alkaline. Many oral medications, specifically certain critical antibiotics, are chemically formulated to require an acidic stomach to dissolve and be absorbed into the bloodstream.
By alkalizing the stomach, you completely destroy the absorption mechanism. The antibiotic passes right through your digestive tract uselessly, leaving your infection completely untreated.
And the interactions are just as dangerous on the excretion side. We talked about how alkalizing the urine traps acidic drugs like aspirin so they can be flushed out, but it works exactly the opposite way for basic drugs.
If a drug is a weak base, like many prescription amphetamines used for ADHD or certain decongestants, an alkaline urine actually prevents them from being ionized.
Instead of being trapped and excreted, the uncharged amphetamine molecules continuously slip back through the kidney walls and reabsorb into the bloodstream. Your body becomes entirely incapable of flushing the drug out. A standard therapeutic daily dose of an amphetamine can rapidly compound into a severe, accidental, and potentially lethal drug overdose, simply because you changed the pH of your urine with baking soda.
You try to treat your heartburn, and you accidentally overdose yourself on your daily medication. It really brings home the reality of what we've been discussing. This has been an absolutely breathtaking, expansive journey. We started this deep dive looking at a simple, mundane white powder sitting next to a jar of pickles in the back of the fridge. We treated it like a joke.
And yet, we have systematically revealed NaHCO3 to be an absolute chemical powerhouse. It is a compound that dictates the physical reality of its environment.
It is the powder that violently cleaves the ester bonds of polymerized grease in your oven. It is the molecular sponge that buffers the deadly acid load in failing kidneys. It is the magnetic trap that locks lethal poisons into the urine in the ER. It is the vacuum that aggressively pulls hydrogen ions out of screaming muscle fibers to shave seconds off elite athletic records. It is the chemical key that strips away the acidic, defensive mode of solid cancer tumors so that chemotherapy can strike true. And, as we just learned, it is a volatile agent that, if misused, can violently rupture a human stomach or induce a fatal cardiac arrest.
It is a definitive masterclass in the dual nature of applied chemistry, the exact same mechanism that cures can kill. It is both entirely mundane and deeply miraculous, entirely benign and violently deadly, dictated completely by the dose, the application, and the profound complexities of human physiology.
I have a very specific request for you when this deep dive is over. I want you to walk into your kitchen, open the refrigerator door, reach past the milk, and pick up that $1 orange box of baking soda. Hold it in your hand for a moment. I want you to genuinely appreciate the profound, powerful, life-altering chemistry that is just sitting there, silently resting in your home. It represents the raw, elegant power of chemical equilibrium.
It undeniably demands a significantly higher level of respect than just being a forgotten trash can deodorizer.
It demands total respect. As we wrap up, it leaves me with one final, deeply provocative thought for you to ponder. We just spent an hour completely unpacking the hidden medical, athletic, and physiological superpowers of cheap, basic baking soda. But it makes you look at the entire medical landscape differently. If simple, fundamental pH manipulation, just adjusting the biological thermostat, can dictate whether a cancer cell survives an attack, or whether a lethal poison destroys a heart, or whether a muscle fails. Are we over-engineering our modern pharmaceuticals? Have we spent billions of dollars and decades of research obsessively inventing vastly complex, synthetic, hyper-targeted new molecules while completely forgetting how to simply manipulate the basic foundational chemical environments that those diseases rely on to survive? What else are we missing right in front of us?